They are the most broken Omegas in the territories, but they cannot even speak the word safe. After their family's massacre, the twin survivors Myri and Lyran have become feral shadows, hating the scent of every man who reminds them of blood and fire. The council is desperate. The territory is dying. But in the darkest, most cursed corner of the Whispering Hollows, a banished alpha is tending wounded creatures and keeping vigil alone, unaware that his honor is about to change everything. When the terrified twins are forced to find him, he does the one thing that will either save them all or shatter them completely. He kneels. The council chamber of the Ironwood territory was a cavern of polished oak and poisonous politics. Councillor Thane Blackwater sat at the head of the crescent table, his presence a suffocating authority that pressed down on every elder in the room. They called him the Architect, a title earned not just from his strategic brilliance, but from the calculated, methodical cruelty that had shaped the territory into his vision. For 5 years since the day he'd orchestrated the exile of Ravel Ironhide, Thane had not faltered. His wolf, a sleek silver beast with eyes like winter ice, was a creature of pure political cunning, and his human side was no different. But his ambition was secondary to the living, breathing crisis now ravaging the territory, the black vein rot. The plague had started 3 weeks ago. Alphas and betas were dropping like autumn leaves, their veins turning black beneath their skin, their wolves howling in madness before death silenced them. Omegas fell ill but survived, creating a grotesque imbalance. The territory needed a cure. Thane's power structure was collapsing, and a territory without alphas, without warriors, without enforcers, was a territory ripe for conquest from neighboring packs. Which is why today was another desperate gamble. The ancient texts are clear, Elder Maris said, her voice thin and reedy with age. She pushed a crumbling leather tome across the table. The black vein requires a cure of sacrifice, the blood of a twice-banished alpha and the tears of twin-born Omegas who have known profound loss. Thane's fingers drummed against the wood. And where, precisely, am I to find such specific ingredients? The Hollowpaw twins, Beta Corin supplied, his voice carefully neutral. Myri and Lyran. Survivors of the Silverbloom massacre. They work in the laundry quarters. Omegas, Thane said dismissively. They're worth nothing. They're twins. They've known loss. They fit the prophecy. Corin paused. And the twice-banished alpha. The room fell silent. Everyone knew. Everyone remembered. Ravel Ironhide, Thane said, his voice sharp as a blade's edge. The traitor. The ghost alpha, Elder Maris corrected quietly. Banished from his birth pack for defending his sister. Banished from Ironwood for refusing your daughter's mating bond. Twice exiled. The prophecies match. Thane's jaw tightened. Ravel Ironhide was the one stain on his perfect record, the one wolf he couldn't fully destroy. The man had survived 5 years in the Whispering Hollows, a forest that killed most who entered. Worse, whispers said he'd become something of a legend. Wolves spoke of him in hushed tones, the honorable alpha who'd chosen principle over power. You want me to send 2 terrified Omega girls into a cursed forest to capture the most dangerous wolf in the territory, Thane said slowly. Or we all die, Maris replied. Thane smiled, cold and calculating. If the twins died in the hollows, 2 more witnesses to the Silverbloom massacre would be eliminated. If Ravel killed them, his guilt would be confirmed and Thane's narrative secured. If they somehow succeeded, well then Thane would have all 3 pawns exactly where he wanted them. Bring me the Hollowpaw twins, he commanded. 20 minutes later the council chamber doors opened, and 2 girls were shoved inside by guards. Myri entered first, her chin raised in defiance despite the rough handling. She was small and lean, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe braid that exposed the jagged scar running from her left cheekbone to her jaw, a permanent reminder of teeth and claws and the night her world burned. Her gray servant's dress was clean but threadbare, and her hazel eyes burned with a fury that made several council members shift uncomfortably. Behind her, Lyran stumbled, nearly falling before Myri's hand shot out to steady her. Lyran was identical in features but utterly different in bearing. Where Myri was fire, Lyran was smoke, present but intangible. Her eyes were downcast, her shoulders curved inward, her entire body a study in learned invisibility. She hadn't spoken in 3 years. The Hollowpaw twins, the guard announced unnecessarily. Thane studied them with the interest of a man appraising livestock. Do you know why you're here? Myri's hand tightened protectively on her sister's arm. No, counselor. The territory is dying. A plague. We need a cure, and you two are essential ingredients. He gestured dismissively. The texts require twin omegas. You're the only pair in Ironwood. Ingredients, Myri repeated, her voice flat. You'll be sent into the Whispering Hollows to retrieve Ravel Ironhide. Alive. You'll bring him back, we'll extract what we need from all three of you, and the territory will be saved. Thane leaned forward. Refuse and you'll be executed for treason. Die in the hollows and well. He smiled. At least you'll have tried. Lyran's breathing quickened, her face draining of color. Myri stepped slightly in front of her. You're sending us to die, Myri said. I'm giving you a chance to be useful, Thane corrected. Omegas have so few opportunities for significance. Beta Corin, standing behind Thane's chair, felt something twist in his chest as he watched the twins. The fierce one with her scarred face and burning eyes. The silent one trembling like a leaf. They were children when their pack burned, 17 now, but children when it happened. And Corin knew, because he'd helped Thane plan the attack, that these girls were the only living witnesses to his master's greatest crime. You leave at dawn, Thane said. The guards will provide you with silver chains. I'm told Ironhide responds well to silver. His smile was a predator's grin. Dismissed. The twins were escorted out, Myri's hand never leaving her sister's arm. In the hallway, once the guards were out of earshot, Myri stopped, her breathing ragged. We're going to die, Lyran whispered, the first words she'd spoken in months. Her voice was rust and cobwebs. No, Myri said fiercely, gripping her sister's shoulders. No, we're not. I won't let him. She didn't clarify whether she meant Thane or the Ghost Alpha. They say he's a monster, Lyran continued, her words tumbling out now like a dam had broken. They say he killed his own pack members. They say he's feral, that the hollows have driven him mad, that he eats the hearts of those who enter his forest. Stop. Myri pulled her sister close, resting their foreheads together. I don't care what they say. I care about us. If we have to go into that forest, we go armed. We go smart. And if the Ghost Alpha tries to touch you. She pulled back, her eyes blazing. I'll kill him myself. Miles away, deep in the heart of the Whispering Hollows where mist clung to ancient trees and moonlight filtered through leaves like silver rain, Ravel Ironhide was not eating hearts or descending into madness. He was setting the broken leg of a fox. The small creature whimpered in his massive, scarred hands, and Ravel made a soft, soothing sound in his throat. Not quite human, not quite wolf. He'd found the fox caught in a rusted hunter's trap, one of dozens of illegal snares he'd been systematically destroying throughout the forest. Easy, little one, he murmured, his voice rough from disuse. Almost done. He bound the leg with careful precision, using strips of cloth torn from his own shirt and straight branches. The fox, sensing safety despite its fear, stopped struggling and watched him with wary amber eyes. Ravel Ironhide was a contradiction to every story told about him in Ironwood. At 6'4", he was massive even for an alpha, his frame hewn from muscle and hardship. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, tangled with leaves and braided with leather cords. His face was all hard angles and old scars, his storm-gray eyes haunted by ghosts. His clothing, what remained of it, was weathered leather and rough-spun fabric, torn and patched and functional. But his hands were gentle as he released the fox, watching it hobble sprint back into the underbrush. Ravel was nothing. He was less than nothing. He was an exile, a twice-banished wolf with no pack, no family, no home. Ironwood's propaganda painted him as a violent traitor. His birth pack had cast him out for defending his sister from an abusive mate bond. And in the 5 years since his final exile, Ravel had carved out an existence in the one place no one would follow, the Cursed Hollows. He didn't hunt for sport. He protected the forest's creatures from poachers. He tended the old-growth trees, maintained the sacred springs, and kept vigil over a territory that had adopted him when no pack would. And he was so lonely. His wolf howled inside him sometimes, a mournful sound that echoed through the trees. The need for pack, for connection, for purpose beyond mere survival. It was a constant ache. But Ravel had made peace with his isolation. It was better to be alone and honorable than part of a pack built on lies. He stood, brushing dirt from his knees, and looked up at the moon filtering through the canopy. The forest whispered around him, and for a moment Ravel could have sworn he smelled something different on the wind. Lavender. Fear. And beneath it all, something that made his wolf lift its head and whine softly. Megas. But that was impossible. No one entered the hollows willingly. Ravel shook his head, dismissing the phantom scent, and returned to his small camp. A lean-to shelter, a dying fire, and the vast, endless silence of exile. He didn't know that tomorrow 2 terrified twins would cross into his forest carrying silver chains and trauma, expecting a monster. He didn't know that the scent of lavender and grief would finally give his loneliness a name. He didn't know that when he saw them his wolf would recognize them instantly, and that the word that would escape his lips, safe, would be the first true thing spoken in the hollows in 5 years. The Whispering Hollows earned its name in the first 100 yards. The trees didn't just rustle. They whispered, a constant susurrus of sound that felt like voices just below the threshold of understanding. Myri gripped the silver chains so tightly her knuckles went white, while Lyran pressed close to her side, a kitchen knife clutched in her trembling fingers. Stay with me, Myri breathed, scanning the mist-shrouded undergrowth. Every shadow was a wolf. Every crack of a branch was an attack. They'd been walking for 2 hours when Lyran stopped, her breathing suddenly rapid and shallow. Her hand flew to her chest, fingers clawing at the fabric of her dress. Lear, Myri caught her sister as she swayed. Breathe. Look at me. Breathe. But Lyran's eyes were distant, seeing something else entirely. The forest. The smoke. Their mother's scream cut short. Their father's wolf falling, blood on snow. Lyran. Myri gripped her sister's face, forcing eye contact. We're alive. We're together. He won't touch us. I swear on our pack's name, I swear on the ashes of Silverbloom, I will kill him before he touches you. Slowly, painfully Lyran's breathing steadied. She nodded, mute once more, and they continued deeper into the hollows. The scent hit them near dusk. It wasn't what they expected. Myri had prepared herself for the reek of old blood, the musk of unwashed alpha male, the stench of rotting kills. Instead, the wind carried pine needles warmed by sun, the clean sharp smell of iron, and something else. Rain on stone, fresh and cold. That's him, Myri whispered, though she didn't know how she knew. They followed the scent to a clearing where the last rays of sunlight broke through the canopy in golden shafts. What they found stopped them both cold. The camp was small but meticulously maintained. A lean-to shelter constructed with careful precision, its roof woven from branches and waterproofed with pine sap. A fire pit ringed with stones, the ashes cold but recently used. Drying herbs hanging from a makeshift rack. A water skin, a worn bedroll, tools arranged with military precision. And everywhere were signs of care. A bird's nest tucked carefully into the shelter's eave, protected from rain. Splints and bandages stacked neatly beside the fire. A young deer, its leg wrapped, drinking from a wooden bowl near the tree line. The deer looked up at them, unafraid, then returned to drinking. This isn't. Lyran's voice cracked. Monsters don't do this. Myri circled the camp, her fury warring with confusion. She'd spent 3 years honing her hatred into a weapon, telling herself that all alphas were the same, brutal, violent, taking what they wanted and destroying what they couldn't claim. But this place spoke of something else entirely. Discipline. Respect. A man living in harmony with a forest that was supposed to be cursed. She knelt by the fire pit, running her fingers through the cold ashes. Mixed in were small bones, rabbit, squirrel, but also the remnants of foraged vegetables. He ate like a wolf but cooked like a man. Survived like an exile but tended the forest like a guardian. Lyri, Lyran whispered urgently. The scent grew stronger. Pine and iron and rain, and beneath it, something that made Myri's wolf stir for the first time since the massacre. Something that felt impossibly, dangerously like safety. He was coming. Myri stood, silver chains ready, placing herself between her sister and the tree line. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed to run, but she'd learned long ago that running only delayed the inevitable. Show yourself, she called, her voice steadier than she felt. We know you're there, Ghost Alpha. The forest held its breath. And then from the shadows he emerged. Ravel Ironhide stepped into the clearing and Myri's breath caught despite herself. He was massive, easily 6'4", his shoulders broad enough to block out the setting sun behind him. Battle scars crisscrossed his bare arms and chest, visible through the tears in his weathered shirt. His dark hair hung past his shoulders in tangled waves, and his face was all hard angles and sharp edges, the face of a man carved by exile and hardship. But his eyes, storm gray and exhausted, they held no cruelty, no hunger, only a bone-deep weariness that looked almost like recognition. He saw the silver chains in Myri's white-knuckled grip, saw Lyran trembling behind her sister, saw their terror written in every rigid line of their bodies. And then Ravel Ironhide did something that shattered every story the twins had been told. He dropped to his knees. Not a collapse. Not a stumble. A deliberate, controlled descent until he knelt in the dirt before them, arms spread wide, palms up, head tilted back to expose the vulnerable column of his throat. The ultimate alpha gesture of submission. Of non-threat. "I won't hurt you," he said quietly, his voice rough as gravel but gentle as rain. "I swear it on my wolf's life. I won't hurt you." Myri's hands shook. This was wrong. Alphas didn't kneel. Alphas didn't submit to Omegas. They took and they broke and they... The attack came from nowhere. 3 wolves burst from the undergrowth, their eyes wild and feral, black veins spider-webbing beneath their skin. Plague-maddened rogues, drawn by the scent of Omegas. They moved with the jerky, unnatural speed of the infected, foam flecking their muzzles. Ravel moved faster. He shifted mid-leap, his human form exploding into a massive black wolf easily twice the size of the rogues. He placed himself between the twins and the attackers, his snarl shaking the trees. The first rogue lunged for Lyran's throat. Ravel caught it midair, his jaws crushing its neck with a sickening crack. The second rogue dodged around him, heading straight for Myri. Ravel twisted impossibly fast, taking the bite meant for her shoulder. Teeth sank into his flank, tearing through muscle. He didn't even flinch, just threw the rogue against a tree with brutal efficiency. The third rogue was smarter, faster. It went low, aiming for Lyran's legs. Ravel launched himself over both twins, his body a living shield. Claws raked down his side. Teeth found his shoulder, his leg, his throat. He fought with savage precision, protecting them even as his own blood soaked the ground. When the last rogue fell, Ravel staggered, his wolf form wavering. He collapsed in the dirt between the twins and the bodies, his breathing labored, blood matting his midnight fur. Myri stood frozen, knife raised, her entire worldview crumbling. He'd taken wounds meant for them. He'd fought 3 against 1 while already injured. He'd chosen their safety over his own. Lyran, trembling, took a step forward. "Don't," Myri started. But her sister was already kneeling beside the massive wolf, her hand, shaking but determined, reaching out to touch his blood-stained fur. The wolf's breathing steadied slightly at her touch, a low whine escaping his throat. Ravel shifted back to human form, his body a canvas of fresh wounds layered over old scars. His storm-gray eyes found Myri first, then Lyran, and something impossibly soft crossed his ravaged features. "Little wildfire," he whispered, his gaze on Myri's scarred face and burning eyes. Then, turning slightly to Lyran's gentle hand still resting on his shoulder, "Little moon." His eyes fluttered closed, blood seeping between his fingers as he pressed them to the worst wound. "Safe now," he breathed. "You're safe now." Then Ravel Ironhide, the ghost alpha, the twice-banished wolf who'd just saved their lives while expecting nothing in return, went still. Ravel woke to the sting of alcohol on his wounds and Lyran's terrified hands trying to stop the bleeding. "Don't move," Myri commanded, her voice sharp but her hands surprisingly careful as she wrapped his shoulder with strips torn from her own underskirt. "You're coming back with us." Council's orders. He didn't fight. Didn't argue. Just nodded once and let them bind his wounds with trembling efficiency. The journey back should have taken 2 days. With Ravel's injuries it stretched to 3. The first night Myri watched him like a hawk watches a snake, the silver chains laid between them and the fire. Ravel settled on the opposite side of the clearing without being told, his back against a tree, leaving them the shelter of the rocks. When Lyran shivered in her thin dress, he slowly, telegraphing every movement, removed his worn cloak and held it out at arm's length. "For the cold," he said quietly. I'll stay here. You take it. Lyran stared at the offered cloak like it might bite her. Myri's hand went to her knife. I don't want anything in return, Ravel added, reading their fear with heartbreaking accuracy. Just, you're cold. Lyran took the cloak. Wrapped it around her shoulders. It smelled like pine and rain and something indefinably safe. She didn't thank him, couldn't, but she stopped shivering. Myri watched her sister fall asleep in an exile's cloak and felt something crack in her chest. The second day, Ravel insisted on hunting despite his wounds. You need to eat, he said simply and disappeared into the forest. He returned an hour later with 2 rabbits already cleaned and skinned, and handed them to Myri without meeting her eyes. I can show you how to move quieter, he offered as they ate. How to track without leaving prints. It's useful. For staying safe. Myri wanted to refuse. Wanted to spit that she didn't need anything from him from any alpha. But Lyran was watching with those wide, hopeful eyes, and the information might keep them alive when this was over. Fine, Myri said curtly. Ravel taught her in the soft afternoon light, his movements careful and non-threatening, always maintaining distance. How to place her feet on stone instead of soil. How to read disturbed moss and bent grass. How to become a ghost in the forest like he'd been forced to become. Why? Myri asked suddenly, surprising herself. Why teach us? We're bringing you back to die. Ravel's storm-gray eyes met hers, and the exhaustion there was an ocean deep. Because you deserve to know how to protect yourselves. Because Omegas shouldn't have to be prey. He paused. And because maybe if I teach you you'll survive whatever comes next even if I don't. Myri had no response to that kind of resigned nobility. The third night as the fire crackled between them and the ironwood border loomed close, Ravel shifted into his wolf form to stand watch. The massive black wolf settled at the edge of the clearing, his eyes scanning the darkness, his body positioned between the twins and any threat that might emerge from the forest. Lyran sat wrapped in his cloak, watching the wolf with something like wonder replacing her fear. She stood slowly and Myri tensed, but Lyran just walked toward the wolf, not too close, respecting distance, and knelt in the dirt. The wolf's ears perked. His tail gave one tentative wag. Lyran's hand reached out, hovering over his fur, and then, with a courage that made Myri's throat tight, she touched his head gently. Good boy, Lyran whispered, her voice rust and cobwebs but present. The first words she'd spoken to anyone but Myri in 3 years. You're a good boy. The great black wolf went utterly still. Then he pressed his massive head into her small hand, a sound like a sob caught in his throat. When he shifted back to human form moments later, tears tracked through the dirt on Ravel Ironhide's scarred face. Thank you, he said hoarsely, not to Myri but to Lyran. Thank you for saying that. Myri watched her sister, her silent, broken sister, smile for the first time since the massacre. Watched this feared alpha cry because someone had called him good. Watched the man who'd taken wounds for them, fed them, taught them, protected them, treat Lyran's words like the precious gift they were. And something in Myri's carefully constructed hatred began to waver, then crack, then crumble like ash in the wind. They crossed into Ironwood territory at dawn on the 4th day, but Myri called a halt at an abandoned hunter's cabin just inside the border. Something in her gut screamed that once they delivered Ravel to the council, whatever fragile trust they'd built would shatter, and they'd never get answers. Tell us why you were exiled, Myri said as they sat around the cabin's small fire that night. It wasn't a request. Ravel stared into the flames for a long moment, his scarred hands clasped between his knees. You sure you want to know? The official story paints me as a monster. We've spent 3 days with you, Lyran said softly, her newfound voice still tentative. We want the truth. Ravel's jaw tightened. 5 years ago, Counselor Thane Blackwater summoned me to his estate. Said his daughter Seraphine had chosen me as her mate. It was an honor, he said. A political alliance that would secure my position in the pack. But, Myri prompted. But when I met Seraphine privately, she was terrified. She begged me not to go through with it. Showed me bruises on her arms where her father had grabbed her, forced her to write the mate proposal. Ravel's voice went hard. Thane was using her as a political pawn, and if I refused he'd just find another alpha to break her with. So you helped her escape, Lyran breathed. I got her to the northern border to her aunt's pack. Gave her enough silver to start over. Ravel looked up, his storm-gray eyes haunted. Thane claimed I'd assaulted her. Abducted her. Turned the entire council against me with fabricated evidence and Seraphine's testimony, which he'd beaten out of her before she ran. I was banished as a traitor and a predator. Myri's blood went cold. The pattern was sickeningly familiar. 3 years ago, she said slowly, our father refused to sell our pack's ancestral healing springs to an Ironwood counselor. The springs have water with healing properties, worth a fortune. 2 weeks after he refused, rogues attacked Silverbloom. They killed everyone except us. Ravel's head snapped up. Silverbloom. You're the Hollowpaw twins. The survivors. His expression darkened. Which counselor wanted your springs? Thane Blackwater, Myri said, and watched recognition and rage flash across Ravel's face. He came to the ruins after, offered to take us in as servants. We had nowhere else to go. It wasn't rogues, Ravel said flatly. Thane doesn't leave loose ends. He hired mercenaries, probably the same Shadow Fong assassins he uses for his other dirty work. Made it look like a rogue attack to seize the land legally. Lyran's hand found Myri's, gripping tight. He killed our family. Our entire pack. For water. And he destroyed my life because I wouldn't let him use his daughter as currency, Ravel added. His fists clenched. How many others? How many lives has he ruined for power? The cabin fell silent except for the crackling fire. Myri's mind raced, connecting threads she'd been too buried in grief and survival to see. Thane at the ruins, his false sympathy. Thane assigning them to the laundry quarters where they'd be forgotten. Thane sending them into the hollows to retrieve the one man who knew his methods. He's going to kill us, Myri said suddenly. All 3 of us. Once the cure is extracted, we're witnesses. We know too much. He's been planning it from the start, Ravel agreed grimly. The plague, the cure, sending you to fetch me, it's all calculated. He gets his cure, eliminates his loose ends, and becomes the hero who saved Ironwood. Lyran's voice was barely a whisper. What do we do? Myri looked at Ravel. This alpha who'd been destroyed for doing the right thing, who'd protected them without hesitation, who'd survived 5 years alone rather than compromise his honor. Her hatred was gone, burned away by truth. We survive, Myri said. And we make sure Thane Blackwater pays for every life he's stolen. Ravel met her eyes across the fire, and for the first time since his exile, something like hope flickered in his expression. Together, he asked. Myri nodded. Lyran squeezed her hand. Together. They entered Ironwood at midday, and the guards were waiting at the gate as if Thane had been counting the hours. 6 armed wolves surrounded them before Myri could even speak, silver chains materializing in their hands like they'd been prepared for weeks. The Ghost Alpha, the lead guard announced with grim satisfaction. Alive as ordered. Ravel didn't resist as they bound him, but his eyes found Myri's one last time. Trust me, that look said. Stay alive. Then they dragged him away toward the council chambers, and the twins were left standing at the gate with a single guard. You're to report to the healing wards, the guard said to Lyran. And you, he nodded to Myri, back to the laundry quarters until summoned. They were being separated. Divided. Controlled. Myri gripped her sister's hand once hard before they were pulled apart. The cure ritual took place in the council's ceremonial hall, witnessed by elders and healers but not by the twins together. Myri was brought first, seated in a chair carved with ancient symbols while Thane stood over her with false benevolence. The ritual requires tears of genuine sorrow, he explained. Think of your lost family. Your destroyed home. Let the grief flow. He didn't need to torture her, not physically. The memories did his work for him. Myri wept as healers collected her tears in crystal vials, each drop a piece of her broken heart weaponized for Thane's purposes. Lyran came next, then Ravel. His blood was drawn with clinical efficiency, multiple vials of crimson that darkened the moment they mixed it with the twins' tears. The combined solution glowed faintly silver, and when the first dying alpha was given the cure, his black veins receded within minutes. The plague began to break. Thane had his miracle. Ravel was thrown into the holding cells beneath the council chambers, silver chains binding him to the stone wall. The guards who brought his meager evening meal spoke freely, assuming the disgraced exile was too broken to matter. 3 days, one guard said to the other. Thane said once the cure is mass-produced and distributed, we finish the job. All 3 of them? The twins and the traitor. Make it look like the ghost Alpha went feral, killed the Omegas and we put him down. Clean narrative. Thane gets his hero moment and the witnesses disappear. Cold-blooded even for him. That's why he runs the council. They left and Ravel tested his chains with methodical precision. 3 days. He had 3 days to warn the twins and find a way out of silver bonds that burned his skin like acid. Meanwhile, Lyran worked in the healing wards, distributing the miracle cure to the infected. The head healer, grateful for extra hands, sent her to Thane's private study to retrieve more supplies. The study was opulent, dark wood leather-bound books, maps of territorial holdings spread across a massive desk. Lyran moved quickly, searching the supply cabinet, when her hand knocked against a hidden compartment. It clicked open. Inside were 7 vials of dark liquid, each carefully labeled with dates. But what made Lyran's blood freeze was the symbol etched into the glass. A stylized wolf's head surrounded by water droplets. The silver bloom pack seal. Her family's mark. Her hands shaking, she pulled one vial free and held it to the light. The liquid was viscous, almost black, with threads of something that looked like ink suspended within. She recognized it from the plague victims. This was black vein rot. The raw, undiluted infection. And it was stored in vials marked with her murdered pack symbol. Thane hadn't just orchestrated the attack on Silverbloom. He'd harvested something from their lands, their sacred healing springs, and corrupted it, weaponized it, created the very plague that was killing Ironwood. The door handle rattled. Lyran's heart stopped. She shoved the vial into her dress pocket and closed the compartment just as the door opened. Thane stood in the doorway, his cold eyes assessing her. "Lost little Omega?" he asked, his voice silk over steel. "Supplies," Lyran managed, her voice barely steady. "The healer sent me for bandages." "The bandages are in the main cabinet." Thane stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "That's the private storage you were searching." Lyran's hand instinctively moved toward her pocket, and Thane's eyes tracked the movement like a predator spotting prey. He smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf who'd just cornered a rabbit. "We need to have a conversation about curiosity," he said softly. "And consequences." Thane didn't kill Lyran in his study. He simply took the vial from her pocket, held it up to the light with a satisfied smile and said, "Clever girl. Pity cleverness won't save you." Then he'd summoned guards to escort her back to the servant quarters with a warning. "The lunar rite is in 2 days. I expect you and your sister to attend. It would be unfortunate if you were absent for Ravel's redemption." The word redemption dripped with mock sincerity. That night, Myri found Lyran in their shared closet of a room, pale and shaking. Her sister pressed the stolen vial into Myri's hands and whispered everything. The marked vials, Thane's threat, the way he'd looked at her like she was already dead. "He knows we know," Lyran said. "He's going to kill us at the rite." "Then we don't go," Myri said flatly. "We run. Tonight." The door creaked open. Both twins spun, hands reaching for non-existent weapons, but it was Beta Corin who slipped inside, his face etched with conflict. "You need to leave," he said without preamble. "The lunar rite is a trap. Thane has it all planned. He's going to chain Ravel to the ceremonial altar, drain him completely for a stronger cure, and when you two protest he'll accuse you of conspiring with the traitor. Public execution disguised as justice." Corin's hands clenched. "I helped him plan the Silverbloom attack. I've done terrible things for that man. But this, children. He's going to torture children. I won't, I can't." "Why tell us?" Myri demanded. "Because maybe if I save you, it'll balance even 1% of the blood on my hands." Corin pulled a small pouch from his belt, coins clinking inside. "Take this. Get to the northern border. There are packs there who'll take refugees." Myri looked at the pouch. At her sister. At the vial of plague-infected blood marked with their family's seal. Then she set the pouch on the bed, untouched. "No," she said. Lyran started. "No," Myri repeated, her voice steel. "We run and Thane wins. He kills Ravel, keeps his power, and 10 years from now he does this to someone else's family. We run and our pack's name dies in shame and no one ever knows the truth. You'll die if you stay, Corin said desperately. Maybe, Pyrie agreed. Or maybe we fight. Maybe we expose him in front of the entire pack. Maybe we trust that the ghost alpha who took wounds for us will fight beside us when it counts. Lyran's hand found her sister's, gripping tight. Together, she said, her voice growing stronger. We do this together. Corin stared at them, two Omega girls barely out of childhood, choosing to walk into an execution with their eyes open, and something like respect crossed his features. You'll need weapons, he said finally. The armory guard changes shift at midnight. I'll make sure he's called away. That night Myri and Lyran stole 2 silver daggers, a hunter's knife and a coil of wire. Not enough to win a war but enough to make Thane bleed. Back in their room, Lyran sat at the small desk and wrote in careful, precise handwriting. She detailed everything. The Silver Bloom massacre, Thane's land grab, the plague vials, Ravel's true exile story, the planned execution. Every crime, every lie, every drop of blood. She sealed it in an envelope marked, "To be opened if we do not survive the lunar rite." At dawn they found Elder Maris in the temple, the same woman who'd presented the prophecy to Thane. Lyran pressed the letter into her weathered hands. "If we die tonight," Lyran said clearly, "make sure the pack knows why." Maris looked at the envelope, then at the twins' faces, scarred and scared but unbending, and nodded once. "May the moon guide you, children of Silverbloom," she whispered. The twins left the temple as the sun rose over Ironwood, weapons hidden beneath their ceremonial dresses, walking toward their potential deaths with their heads held high. They would face Thane Blackwater with the truth as their weapon and a banished alpha as their only ally. And if they fell, they would fall fighting. The lunar rite clearing was packed with the entire Ironwood pack. Hundreds of wolves gathered under the full moon to witness what Thane had promised would be a historic ceremony of redemption and gratitude. Torches ringed the sacred space, and at its center stood a massive stone altar carved with ancient symbols. Ravel was already chained to it when the twins arrived, silver binding his wrists, ankles, and throat. His skin burned where the metal touched, smoke rising from the contact points, but his storm-gray eyes found theirs across the crowd and held steady. "Trust me." Thane stood at the altar in ceremonial robes, every inch the benevolent leader. "Tonight we honor those who brought us salvation." His voice carried across the clearing. The ghost alpha who gave his blood. The twin omegas who gave their tears. Together they saved Ironwood from extinction. The pack howled approval, ignorant of the nightmare about to unfold. Guards seized the twins, dragging them to a device positioned on either side of the altar. Metal frames with articulated claws designed to grip and squeeze. Myri fought, landing one solid kick before they forced her into position. Lyran was shoved into the twin device. Both girls locked in place as the metal claws closed around their arms, their ribs, positioned to cause maximum pain. "But the cure requires refinement," Thane continued, his mask slipping into something cold. "More blood. More tears. A final extraction." He turned a crank and the claws tightened. Lyran screamed. Myri bit through her lip to keep from giving him the satisfaction, blood streaming down her chin. "You want to know the beautiful irony?" Thane said conversationally, stepping closer to the twins. "I created the black vein rot. Synthesized it from your precious Silverbloom springs, the ones your father refused to sell me. I killed your pack, weaponized your inheritance, and now I'm using you to cure the very plague I unleashed. I'll be remembered as Ironwood's savior while you 3 disappear as tragic casualties." He cranked the device tighter. The claws dug deeper, drawing blood. "And the best part," Thane smiled at Ravel, "is watching the mighty ghost alpha die helpless while the omegas he tried to protect suffer. Poetic, really." Myri's vision blurred with pain, but through it she saw Ravel straining against his chains, saw the anguish in his eyes that had nothing to do with his own agony and everything to do with theirs. This alpha who'd kneeled. Who'd protected them. Who taught them to track and shared his cloak and cried when Lyran called him good. This man who'd chosen honor over everything again and again, expecting nothing in return. Something inside Myri didn't break. It ignited. "Love," she roared, her voice raw and defiant, the word that had terrified her for 3 years finally ripped from her throat. "His name is love." Power exploded from her chest. A blinding silver light that was every ounce of Omega magic she'd suppressed since the massacre. Not weakness. Strength. Not submission. Pure protective fury. Love. Lyran's voice joined hers, and their twin bond amplified the magic into something transcendent. The light merged, intensified, became a supernova of silver fire that purged everything false. The metal claws shattered. The silver chains binding Ravel disintegrated. The black vein rot still lingering in infected wolves burned away like morning mist. Ravel shifted mid-fall from the altar, his massive black wolf hitting the ground already in motion. He launched at Thane with 5 years of rage and betrayal fueling every muscle. Thane tried to run. Tried to call his guards. But Corin stepped forward, blocking the guard's path. "Let justice be done," Corin said simply. Ravel's jaws closed around Thane's throat, not killing but holding. Myri staggered forward, the plague vial in her bloodied hand, holding it high. "He created the plague," she shouted to the pack. "He murdered Silverbloom. He's been killing you all to seize power." Elder Maris stepped forward, Lyran's letter in her hands. "The evidence is documented. Witnessed. Undeniable." The pack's howls turned from celebration to fury. The council convened in 30 seconds. The vote was unanimous. Thane Blackwater was executed at moonrise, his crimes proclaimed to every wolf present, his legacy destroyed as thoroughly as he'd destroyed others. And when it was done, Ravel shifted back to human form and collapsed. The twins caught him, all three falling together in the blood-soaked dirt, broken, battered, but alive. "Love," Myri whispered against his shoulder, the word no longer a weapon but a truth. "Stay," Lyran added. "Always," Ravel breathed. "Always." The healing took weeks. Ravel's silver burns required constant tending, and the twins' wounds from the torture device left scars that would never fully fade. But they recovered together in the Ironwood healing wards, Myri and Lyran refusing to leave Ravel's side even when the newly reformed council insisted on separate rooms for propriety. "We've been improper our whole lives," Myri had said flatly. "We're not starting protocol now." When Ravel was finally strong enough to stand before the council, they cleared him of all charges with formal apologies that rang hollow after 5 years of exile. Elder Maris, now acting as interim leader until proper elections could be held, offered him the position of head alpha. "You've proven your honor beyond question," she said. "Ironwood needs a leader who puts principle above power. We're asking you to come home." The entire council chamber held its breath. Ravel looked at the elders, at the territory that had cast him out and only welcomed him back when they needed him. Then he looked at the twins standing beside him, Myri's hand casually resting near his as if touch had become natural, Lyran's quiet strength radiating beside her sister. "I'm honored," Ravel said carefully. "But my home isn't here anymore." He turned to the twins. "Where do you want to go?" Myri and Lyran exchanged a look, that twin communication that needed no words. "Home," they said together. Silverbloom. The journey to the ruins took 3 days. Retracing the path of loss but this time walking toward something instead of away. The Silverbloom territory had gone wild in 3 years, nature reclaiming what violence had stolen, but the sacred healing springs still flowed crystal clear, and the old pack gathering place remained, a clearing ringed by ancient stones where the moon shone bright and unobstructed. They arrived at dusk on the full moon, and the twins stood in the center of the clearing where their family had once gathered for celebrations, for ceremonies, for all the moments that made a pack a home. Ravel hung back at the edge, giving them space for their grief. But Myri turned to him, her scarred face illuminated by moonlight, and held out her hand. "Don't stand there like a stranger. You're part of this." Ravel stepped forward, and when he reached the center of the clearing, he did what he'd done that first night in the hollows. He knelt. Not in submission this time. Not in surrender. But in partnership. "Let me help you rebuild," he said, his voice steady and sure. "Not as your alpha. Not as someone who owns this place or owns you. But as your family. If you'll have me." Myri dropped to her knees in front of him, tears streaming freely now. Not tears of pain but of healing, of homecoming, of finding something she'd thought was lost forever. She took his scarred hand in hers. "You knelt for us when we were nothing but terrified girls with silver chains," she said. "You protected us when you owed us nothing. You taught us that not all strength comes with cruelty." Her voice cracked. Yes. Yes, you're our family. Lyran knelt beside her sister, placing her hand over both of theirs, completing the circle. Love, she said clearly, her voice no longer rust but ringing and true. Stay. Always, Ravel promised, and his eyes shone with tears. I'll stay always. They shifted together under the full moon, one massive black wolf and two smaller silver ones, their howls rising in harmony. Not a howl of mourning but of claiming, of belonging, of three broken souls finding each other in the ruins and deciding to build something new. The twins who'd hated every man had found the one worth calling love. The ghost alpha who'd lost everything had found redemption not in power but in being chosen. And together, in the ashes of what was lost, they created what fate had never offered them. A family forged not by blood or destiny, but by trust, by choice, by the fierce decision to protect each other against a world that had tried to break them. Silverbloom would rise again. Not as it was but as it could be. And this time it would be built on truth.